What if Ned Stark had demanded a trial by combat instead of agreeing to confess to treason? This pivotal moment in Game of Thrones history would have changed the entire political landscape of Westeros. Ned Stark, the honorable warden of the North, was known for his sense of duty and moral compass. But what if he had chosen to fight for his innocence instead of submitting to the Lannisters' manipulations? The consequences of such a decision would have been far-reaching, setting off a chain reaction that could alter the fates of many key characters and houses in Westeros. Ned Stark's decision to confess to treason, a moment that ultimately led to his execution, was one of the most heartbreaking and shocking events in the series. In the original timeline, Ned's self-sacrifice and unwavering commitment to his values were seen as noble, but it also sealed his fate. He had hoped that by confessing, he could protect his family from further harm. But what if, instead of giving in to the Lannisters' demands, he had chosen to fight for his life? The immediate consequences. The first and most immediate consequence of Ned demanding a trial by combat would be the direct challenge it posed to the Lannisters. In the world of Westeros, trial by combat was seen as the ultimate form of justice. It would have been a highly risky move, but it would have forced the Lannisters to either accept the challenge or find a way to manipulate the situation in their favor. This decision would have put them on the defensive, forcing Tywin Lannister to either champion the Lannisters' cause or find someone willing to fight in his stead. If Tywin had chosen to fight, the Lannisters would have had to provide their champion, someone capable of defeating a skilled warrior like Ned. The challenge would have been a spectacle for the entire kingdom to witness, and it would have served as an opportunity for the noble houses to observe the struggle for power in real time. However, if Tywin had chosen to opt out and instead appointed a champion, it would have raised questions about his courage and resolve, potentially tarnishing the Lannisters' image. The Stark family's position. For the Stark family, this decision would have immediately changed the trajectory of their future. Robb Stark, who had already raised an army in the North, would have been emboldened by his father's decision. If Ned had won his trial by combat, it would have provided the North with a much-needed morale boost. A victory for Ned would have been seen as a victory for the North, and it would have unified his bannermen and allies under a banner of defiance against the Lannisters. However, if Ned lost the trial by combat, his death would have served as a rallying cry for House Stark to fight back. Robb Stark, already a capable leader, would have been forced to lead the North into battle with even greater resolve, potentially solidifying his position as the king in the North much earlier than in the original timeline. The Starks' commitment to revenge and honor would have fueled their drive to reclaim their power and protect their family. Catelyn Stark, who had been devastated by Ned's death in the original timeline, would have reacted differently to this alternate reality. If Ned had fought for his life, Catelyn's grief over his loss would have been replaced by a sense of pride in his courage. She would have continued to support Robb in his efforts to fight the Lannisters and secure the North, but her role as a political figure would have been significantly altered by the outcome of the trial. The political landscape of Westeros. The political ramifications of Ned Stark's demand for trial by combat would have been far-reaching. If he had succeeded in his trial, it would have sent shockwaves throughout the realm, as it would have been seen as a major victory for honor and justice over the Lannisters' manipulation and treachery. The balance of power in King's Landing would have been significantly altered, and it could have pushed the Lannisters into a defensive position. If Ned had been victorious, his victory would have granted him both legal and moral legitimacy, not only in the eyes of the North, but throughout the realm. His position as Warden of the North would have been reinforced, and the Lannisters would have been forced to reckon with the strength of House Stark. This could have resulted in a significant shift in the power structure, with the Lannisters having to recalibrate their strategies. On the other hand, if Ned had lost the trial, the Lannisters would have solidified their control over the Iron Throne. With the execution of Ned Stark, Tywin would have asserted even more authority, and the Lannisters would have continued to tighten their grip on the realm. However, The resulting anger from the North and other noble houses would have fueled the eventual rebellion against the Lannisters, giving rise to the War of the Five Kings much sooner than it unfolded in the original timeline. The Lannisters' reactions. Cersei Lannister, Tywin's ambitious daughter, would have been forced to confront the possibility of her family losing control over the Iron Throne. Her desire to protect her children and secure Joffrey's reign would have been tested by the outcome of the trial. If Robert's son was defeated by Ned, Cersei would have needed to reconsider her next moves. She might have attempted to manipulate events behind the scenes, relying on her cunning to continue controlling her son, Joffrey, while working towards solidifying her position in King's Landing. Jaime Lannister, despite his struggles with honor and loyalty, would have found himself torn between his love for his family and his growing awareness of the consequences of their actions. His brother Tyrion, ever the opportunist, would have seized the opportunity to use his wits to maneuver through the changing political landscape. Tyrion, who had already shown signs of discontent with his family's tactics, would likely have seen Ned's victory as a sign that the Lannisters' hold on power was not as secure as they had believed. The long-term consequences of Ned Stark's decision to demand a trial by combat would have reshaped the entire political landscape of Westeros. Whether he emerged victorious or lost the trial, the ripple effects would be felt across the realm, especially among the Lannisters, Starks, and other powerful houses. If Ned had won the trial by combat, it would have been a defining moment for House Stark. The victory would have confirmed their moral superiority and enhanced their standing both in the North and the rest of Westeros. His triumph would have been seen as a victory for honor, and it would have rallied his bannermen and allies, solidifying their support in the ongoing struggle against the Lannisters. The North, emboldened by this act of defiance, would have rallied behind Ned Stark, and Robb's leadership would have gained further legitimacy. His army would have been stronger, and his claim as king in the North would have become more solidified, bringing together even more houses to support his cause. In King's Landing, the political ramifications of Ned's victory would have been disastrous for the Lannisters. With Tywin Lannister's plans thwarted, the balance of power would have shifted. Cersei Lannister, who was already struggling to keep the Lannisters' control intact, would have been forced to accept a reduced role in the political maneuvering of the realm. The defeat of Tywin's plans would have emboldened House Tyrell and House Martell, who were already scheming to break the Lannisters' grip on power. The Tyrells, particularly Margaery, would have seized the opportunity to further their influence in King's Landing, possibly even offering marriage alliances to other noble houses to strengthen their own political position. The Tyrells would have become the new power brokers in the capital, leaving the Lannisters scrambling for support. If Ned had lost the trial, however, the Lannisters would have secured an even firmer grip on power. Ned's execution, still a shocking and painful moment for the North, would have marked the complete collapse of Stark influence in Westeros. The death of the Warden of the North would have been a devastating blow to House Stark, and the ensuing grief and anger would have fueled Robb Stark's resolve to continue his rebellion. Robb would have been more determined than ever to avenge his father's death, but without the political guidance of Ned, his rebellion would have faced even greater challenges. The Lannisters, emboldened by Ned's death, would have been free to continue their efforts to control the throne, and their power would have been nearly unassailable for the time being. With Tywin Lannister still in control, the Lannisters would have moved forward with their plans to solidify Joffrey's position on the throne. The political maneuvers that Tywin had carefully crafted would now play out without the looming threat of Robert's true-born son. Cersei, feeling secure in her son's future, would have continued her efforts to manipulate the court and keep the throne in the Lannister family's hands. However, Tywin's presence would still be required to hold the family together, and his influence over Joffrey would have remained crucial. His grip on the throne, despite Joffrey's volatility, would have been strong, and any attempts by Robb Stark or other factions to challenge him would have been met with resistance. While the Lannisters consolidated their power in the south, the Starks' fight for survival in the north would have taken on new importance. Without Ned's leadership, Robb Stark would have been forced to make decisions that might fracture his alliances with other northern houses. Catelyn Stark, driven by grief and vengeance, might have made more drastic choices, which could have pushed House Stark further toward a more isolated stance. Her decisions, particularly her capture of Tyrion Lannister, would have strained relations with other houses and made it harder for Robb to maintain a strong alliance with the southern factions that oppose the Lannisters. The fate of the Starks would depend largely on their ability to navigate the shifting political tides of Westeros. Without Ned's guidance, Robb would have been more vulnerable to manipulation by other houses. The Lannisters' strength in the south would have meant that the north could not stand alone forever, and Robb's rebellion, while effective on the battlefield, might have lacked the strategic support it needed to succeed. Meanwhile, Arya Stark's journey would have been fundamentally altered by the events in King's Landing. Her quest for vengeance would have taken on a different direction. Without the political instability caused by Ned's death, Arya's path might have been more focused on survival rather than revenge. Yet, her encounters with the Lannisters and her eventual training with the Faceless Men would have likely still led her down the path of becoming an assassin. The political chaos in Westeros would have given Arya even more opportunities to strike at her enemies, but her motivations would have changed, and her quest might have evolved from one of pure vengeance to one of necessity and power. The political turmoil that would have ensued following Ned's trial by combat would have drawn other factions into the fold. The Martells, who had long sought revenge for the murder of Oberyn and the Martell family, would have used the chaos to further their cause. With the Lannisters weakened by Tywin's loss of influence, Dorne could have used this moment to gain a foothold in the politics of Westeros. Their attempts to secure justice for Oberyn's death and to claim power for House Martell would have set them on a collision course with the Lannisters, further intensifying the power struggles that already plagued the Seven Kingdoms. In the north, Jon Snow's path would have been affected by these events as well. The struggle for control of the north, now with Robb Stark as the king in the north, would have played out differently without the steady hand of Ned guiding Jon. Jon's journey at the Wall, while still important in defending Westeros from the dangers beyond the Wall, would have been shaped by the increasing instability in the south. As Jon's role grows more significant, he would be drawn into the political game of Westeros, where the fate of the North and the realm at large would rest on the choices he makes.